All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is George Arthur, and I'm part of Team Starlord along with Laura Lord. And we did our project on a fertility data set. Now, this data set was collected by a team of scientists a number of years ago, and they were pretty much trying to figure out what variables affected fertility in males. Their sample size was 100, using semen samples from 100 white European volunteers. We got this data set from the online archive, which is ics.uci.edu, as you can see over there. And they did use the SPSS program, but we prefer to use R instead, since that's the one we're most familiar with. Now, they did these tests using 10 variables that they collected. The first being the output diagnosis, which is the test results. And they pretty much factor in whether the participants' semen levels were normal or altered. Season in which the analysis was performed, which is spring, summer, fall, winter. Age at the time of analysis, which ranges from 18 to 36, but in the case of this data set, it is from 27 to 36. That's the number of people that they were able to get. Childhood diseases, that's smallpox, measles, mumps, accident or serious trauma in the past, surgical intervention, high fevers in the last year, frequency of alcohol consumption, smoking habit, and finally, number of hours spent sitting per day. I thought this variable in itself was quite interesting because it was only recently that scientists began looking at the amount of time we spend sitting per day and how it affects our health. Our hypothesis was to figure out, if these factors, these 10 factors or 10 variables, actually do affect male fertility levels, overall male fertility levels. So we're going to go through here, and then we're going to, I'm going to show you guys what we found out using different plots. And keep in mind, this was all done using R. First, we have the test diagnosis, which are the final test results. On this end, we have O, which stands for altered. So that means there was actually a change, in these participants' semen levels. And then normal, which means there were no changes at all. As you can see here, there's a total of 100, and here we have 88 for normal and 12 for altered in this case. Up next, we have the participants with childhood diseases. Remember, those are measles, mumps, so on. 0, saying that yes, they did have, one of those diseases I mentioned before, and then 1 being those who did not. You can see here. Could also tell as well that there's quite a high count. There's a higher count in people who resulted in normal levels, who said they did not have any childhood disease in the past. And the number of people who did show altered levels is also higher on the not having a disease portion. So this variable itself did not really affect, childhood disease did not really seem to affect a male's fertility level. Age during analysis. Now, this is what I mentioned before. The original premise of it was for it to be just ages 18 to 36. We have here a minimum of 27 and then high of 36. The highest, with most number of participants being 28, age of 28 with 28 participants. Yep, that's not made up. That's actually crazy. And then here we have 30, age 30, second highest with a count of 20. Season, you can see the highest one for normal levels was during the springtime, followed up by winter and fall, and of course lower one would be not so much. These are the seasons when the tests were performed, so they really shouldn't factor into something like this. So once again, our hypothesis is being challenged. Accident history. So accident or trauma history, participants with accident or trauma history. Here we can see a majority of them did experience accident history in the past, and it does seem to have a sort of effect on their fertility levels. As we can see, there's a higher altered fertility level for the those who did experience an accident in the past. A surgical history. That's just going over if they had surgery in the past to see if for surgical intervention to help with their case. There is a slight increase on the fact that those who did not have any surgery, there's a bit higher than those who did have surgery. So that's showing you that the surgical interventions could possibly have a factor in bettering a male's fertility level. High fever in recent months. This ranges from within the less than 3 months ago to more than 3 months ago, and one being never. This, as you can see here, it doesn't really show much to say that that's actually a factor, whether or not they had a fever or not, if that affects the fertility levels, especially at the times of the test. Alcohol consumption. So this was on a scale of 0 to 1 over here. And we can see here that the median, we have the highest one at the, I'd say the secondary, the second quartile, upper quartile, is where we can see the highest numbers in terms of our participants. We're falling between 0.7 and 0.9 over here. Smoking habit, -1 being never, 0 occasionally, and 1 daily. We have a higher amount who did have normal levels who never smoked, and there also a higher amount who also did not smoke, but they also have the highest amount of altered fertility tests. So smoking habits doesn't really show if it's a factor, whether or not it's a factor in this case either. Number of hours sitting. This is what I mentioned before. Some people say, or some studies show that amount of time, the more time a person spends sitting down, the more it affects their health. So here we can see a scale of 0 to 1 here. With, once again, most of our participants land in this range over here, where it's about a median average, over here, as you can see. There is an outlier here in terms of altered fertility results. Just one person who spends most of his time actually sitting per day, as you can see over here. So this is just a few of the factors that variables that we looked at before. I'm not going to pass it on to Laurel. She's going to talk more about regression analysis. Alrighty, so that's everything I have for you guys. Thank you, and hope you enjoy your day.
Thank you so much for that, George. As he said, we are looking into the semen samples from 100 European volunteers and going to see if that there is any substantial information we can find concerning how their activities or their surroundings do go ahead and affect their fertility. So one of the most important things to first do is go ahead and continue doing some exploratory data. So that's what we're going to be doing right now. George started off with the charts just to get a better visual, and this is the background detail that we're going to be doing. As you can see up here, it is that we did look into 100 observations with 10 variables. And it's good to look through the coding so you understand how the system in the background and is interpreting the data and how it recognizes it. And you could avoid a lot of difficulty if you do get that picture early on. So that's what I wanted to emphasize. We did utilize supply just to get a better understanding. Once again, this is another way to represent the information by focusing on standard deviation. This is another way to get a better visual of the information. Overall, this is a matrix scatter plot that you can actually see here that the data is a bit questionable simply because you can note that there are edges that clustering to the edges of the box, really, and that is just due to the nature of the variables. A lot of them are binary, and others have maybe like 3 values to choose from, and it's repeated for those 100 participants. So it's a bit difficult, but we'll see what we can get. So from the inference, we were hoping to analyze the internal and external factors. As I mentioned, the socio-demographic data, environmental factors, health status, and life habits that can affect the seminal fluid production and thus affect the male fertility levels. So in going through the different variables that are available, we decided to indeed hone in on the output analysis. This is because investigation into fertility has become a topic of interest for many countries around the world, and as we are noticing that there are indeed declining birth rates, especially amongst the millennials. We have a lot of stuff to do. But it also could be due to other external factors that we might need to look into. And so we're hoping to use the successes versus failures or high levels of motility for us to be able to make conclusions moving forward. So we are going to start with plotting linear regression details. Here, we are going to look at the season for which the analysis was performed. And as you can tell, the information, once again, is indeed noting a bit of, how should I say, just segregation in a way that this chart doesn't really truly give us a full understanding of what is available. But I will say that having a p-value that is fairly low, as very close to the ideal, is good. And the r squared is not the best, but we'll go ahead and check through the other options that are available. We can see that the p-value for the childhood diseases such as mumps, etc., are indeed a bit, the p-value is a bit high, which is undesirable. And once again, we're noticing that a few of these values are a bit out of the desired range. And you will notice too that the graph is not quite detailed in showing you. You are able to notice the slight differences between them. Some of them have a higher correlation than others, but really and truly, it is not substantial enough to come to a fair assumption about these. So what we're going to do is look at a table that has a summary of the output analysis compared to the other independent variables, and we can see here that their season, if you look at seasonality, I guess, it does have the best p-value as well as the best adjusted r squared as well. So it's unfortunate, but it does make slight sense if you're going out, but we won't make assumptions at this point. One of the data concerns that we had was the fact that indeed the main variable that we're looking at is binary in nature, and so that creates quite a few problems. And so what we did look into was the logic model or logic regression that is sometimes applied to dichotomous outcome variables, and so this is what we'll look at moving forward. And so with the prediction, we are still going to assume that we can get some beneficial data by looking at perhaps the environmental factors and the life habits. So as we said, we noted that there might be something to the season, so that's an environmental factor. Let's see here. So the legit model, it does consider binomial data, and having been involved in an accident apparently or a serious trauma appears to show that it can change the log odds of the semen being normal versus altered by minus 2.104. So indeed that the use of the logic model was a little bit more logical, and it does use the GLM formula. We also could see here that the logic model does allow for confidence intervals, where this one uses the log likelihood and another was using the standard error. They're very similar. All right, so we're going to make a few conclusions at this point. The results, ultimately, it appears that when using a simplistic method of analysis, the highest correlation was between the seasons. Specifically, it had the best adjusted R-squared and the highest p-value. Unfortunately, it was a little bit out of the range. Overall, the model suggests that having been involved, as I said, in an accident might change your log odds. Right, so this is just a visual indicator of the seasons, as we mentioned. It's just a deeper dive, and it does show that the season of spring has the highest count of normal outcomes and winter has the lowest. If we're looking at coding a bit closely, we just wanted to highlight that the supply was used for the standard deviation function, and it did indicate that environmental factors and life habits might have the highest values, and so unfortunately at times that causes a bit of confusion with the assumptions that we had made so far. So considering the binary model does appear to be beneficial. We did have a few concerns when looking at the same data set. We did find other case studies that attempted to investigate this data, and based on different mathematical principles that could be applied to counteract the issues, whether it be binomial, etc., they just may vary. The previous study that was done found that the most significant relationship was actually related to the subject's age. So as the person was older, the successes went down. When one encounters binary data, it's just that we had to fully understand it and lean into logic, which was not a concept that we were very familiar with. Furthermore, this variable required additional adjustments in order to be effectively tested. We had to tweak a code to get it to be numerical. We believe that further investigation into these variables is possible. Due to the seasonal nature, perhaps we could look into improved family planning strategies if that is indeed substantial, and perhaps it could help with companies that are related to reproductive products. This data set could have been enhanced by the inclusion of family statistics, such as any hereditary data that we might have gleaned information from. Moreover, past studies have likened sleep deprivation to being as detrimental as alcohol consumption. And so I believe that it would have been worthwhile to see how sleep deprivation does affect the sperm successes as well. So we're just going to go through some final thoughts. Ultimately, the data manipulation proved to be a bit more difficult than expected. However, the experience was indeed enriching. And overall, we would say that there are definite issues to limiting the sample to only one race, the white European volunteers. I believe that perhaps multiple races might have allowed for the findings to be a bit more conclusive and applicable to a wider audience. All right, so that is it. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them down or subscribe to our channel. Just kidding. Give us a good grade, thumbs up. Thank you. Have a good night.